For a year and a half now, the Central African country of Burundi has been on the brink of civil war. In 2015, President Pierre Nkurunziza, already in power for more than 10 years, announced that he would be seeking a third term, which the Constitution forbids and which also violates the 2005 Arusha peace agreement, which ended a 12-year-long civil war that left 300,000 people dead. Burundians took to the streets to protest their president's proposed third term. That was followed by an attempted military coup which failed. And the result for the Burundian media was a government crackdown on dissent. Accused of allying with the opposition, all independent radio stations were closed in a country where illiteracy and a lack of internet access make the population reliant on radio as the primary source of news and information. The stories now going unreported include cases of mass murder, forced disappearances, torture, as well as a refugee crisis affecting more than 400,000 people. Then there's the specter of what happened next door in Rwanda, the genocide of 1994. Like Rwanda, Burundi's ethnic makeup is majority Hutu, minority Tutsi. And given the role that the media, particularly radio, played in Rwanda, many Burundians fear that their state media outlets may, through their broadcasts, turn this political crisis into an ethnic one. The Listening Post's Johanna Hoos now on the challenges of reporting in Burundi.
On the 13th of May 2015, Burundians heard this message on the radio.
J'ai l'honneur de vous annoncer que suite à l'insécurité qui règne dans notre pays, que les frontières burundaises sont fermées.
Following weeks of mass protests opposing President Pierre Nkurunziza's controversial bid for a third term, a faction of the army took over the airwaves of the country's most popular privately owned radio station, Radio Publique Africaine, in an attempt to claim control over the country.
Nous prions à tout homme chargé de la défense nationale, tout militaire, de faire tout son possible, de faire respecter ses consignes.
The coup was a failure. The Nkurunziza government pushed back against the rebel soldiers and shut down all private radio stations. A year and a half later, the president remains in power and the media blackout continues. Burundian journalists blame the government for the media crackdown, but the government tells a different story.
Certains médias ont connu.
Admittedly, some media outlets have faced problems. Why? Because the same groups or individuals who attempted to overthrow Burundi's democratically elected institutions destroyed those outlets. We have the evidence.
Qui l'ont fait.
The government's evidence was never shown to us. What we did find was footage from just hours after the coup attempt, when forces loyal to the president stormed the offices of Radio Publique Africaine, which was later set ablaze. 3 other radio stations faced similar attacks. All 4 remain closed, and their journalists say they continue to be targeted by the government.
La situation que le Burundi traverse.
Since April 2015, the situation here has been very difficult for the media. They are seen as the opponent. The people from the government who are convinced that the media played a decisive role in the organization of the failed coup, which is particularly difficult for the journalists who have stayed working in the field.
Il y a des gens qui sont poursuivis.
Yes, the authorities are pursuing certain journalists, but only those who supported the coup. The opinion of international media will continue to be swayed by those saying the Burundian government is hunting down all journalists. We regret that people got killed, but we hope that the world sees that this is a conspiracy orchestrated by the opposition.
Machination orchestrée par l'opposition.
With nearly all private radio outlets shut down and numerous journalists forcibly exiled or disappeared, Burundians are facing an information vacuum. It is only pro-government or state outlets that remain to fill the void. A growing concern is that these outlets are spinning narratives of ethnic division, ringing alarm bells for Burundians who remember the genocide across the border in Rwanda, which has an ethnic makeup almost identical to Burundi's.
Avis à tous les Burundiens qui nous écoutent, oui, à tous les Burundiens qui nous écoutent, le Rwanda appartient à ceux qui le défendent vraiment.
In 1994, repeated messages of hate, broadcast on a Rwandan radio station controlled by Hutus, Radio Libre Mille Collines exacerbated ethnic tensions there. Rwandans took up arms, and in the bloodshed that followed, more than 800,000 people, mostly Tutsi, were killed.
There are some interesting parallels in the sense that the 1994 genocide occurred in the context of a civil war, and it made people more susceptible to extreme messaging. Now, we're not quite at a civil war in Burundi, but in times of crisis, state media carry quite inflammatory messages. The term that we've used is ethnicization from above. This is a political manipulation of ethnic fears, which is orchestrated by the government to try to solidify their support among the Hutu population. And to do so, they need to say that we are being besieged by someone. And of course, who do they pick? Well, it's Tutsis, because Tutsis are the age-old enemy.
Burundi National Radio on TV, you know, it's a government-owned medium. So it means politicians come and issue declarations. They say things which are controversial. These lead some people to believe that the public media is playing a role in fueling the ethnic crisis.
Il n'y a pas de rhétorique génocidaire au Burundi.
This government doesn't use genocidal vocabulary. Under no circumstance has the government blamed the Tutsis. We have to establish the truth, particularly given that there are certain people who say Burundi is at risk of committing crimes against humanity and genocide. These allegations are part of a slanderous and defamatory campaign aimed at winning over the sympathy of the international community. It is a last resort by the rebels.
C'est finalement cela qui pouvait prendre.
In a media landscape as sparse as Burundi's, one privately owned, openly critical publication, Iwachu, stands out. The paper carries stories that none of Burundi's other papers will. Abductions by the ruling political party, the lack of investigation into the killing of opposition politicians, and the hounding of journalists. Iwachu's director is in exile, and a staff journalist has been missing for the past 2 months.
Iwachu has to go deep in some of the stories that the state media does not really cover. So if those state media are broadcasting things that seem to be making everybody believe that everything is fine in Burundi, you understand that there is something which lack. And what is it? There is this kind of economic downturn. There is the impact of this crisis on the daily lives of Burundians. This needs to be reported.
Iwachu is actually a long-standing news organisation in Burundi, and it's one of the best. It's reporting government actions, it's reporting human rights abuses, but it's doing so in quite a neutral way, and it's trying to not alienate the authorities too much while retaining its independence. So they're doing a tough job, because they are one of the very few professional independent media outfits with proper editorial control still working inside Bujumbura. But we also have to remember that print media is pretty much absent outside Bujumbura.
That lack of reach is a challenge for Iwachu, but may also be the secret to its survival. Its circulation is so low that unlike radio broadcasts that can reach large audiences across the country, the government does not fear the paper's influence. Another outlet, SOS Media Burundi, is an underground broadcast collective that came together in the aftermath of the failed coup. It publishes radio reports online, and most of its journalists remain anonymous. However, in a country where internet access is so limited, SOS's impact online is negligible. Its real audience is outside the country.
We wanted to come up with a way to make sure the public, both inside and outside the country, weren't just being fed rumors. Everyone was spreading them, and people were consuming them as if they were word of God. I've never witnessed this level of rumor mongering, so we decided to create this online collective.
In Burundi, how many people can have access to the internet connection? Very few. It means that you can only follow SOS Media Productions when you use a social media like WhatsApp, when you use Facebook, Twitter, or any other social media. So SOS Media can hardly reach the majority of the people.
We know what we do is not enough. We're constantly pushing for the media that have been shut down to reopen. The absence of independent media is a serious blow for the Burundian public, who need information every day.
there is no sign that the space for independent journalism will reopen anytime soon. Burundi is going through a political crisis that could turn ethnic, and there is radio silence, except for those voices that the government wants people to hear.